somebody's been to you on another show. Don't say when. Were you not telling me that, Jaron? I mean, describe what regular talk show hosts are like to people. Tell the truth.
Worst of the worst. No.
I can barely hear you. You got to turn your audio up.
It's always heated. It's always heated up in here. Live radio is always tough, but it's.
Okay, I want the truth from you. Am I not a sweetheart compared to other hosts?
You're an angel.
Look, I've seen other hosts.
Some other hosts, yeah.
And I've seen them throw stuff, throw fits. I don't know why. That's because they get nervous being on air. My problem is I forget I'm on air and almost fall asleep half the time. I can get up before a crowd of 5,000 people and literally start falling asleep. I've done this so long and so much. I didn't get butterflies 13, 14 years ago when I'd get in front of crowds. And now it's not butterflies. It's, okay, I'm just so used to it. But anyways. Now I've been demonized by the BBC, and then we'll cover this at the bottom of the hour. This just came out. Folks, I'm getting hit by national media every day. I said I was going to have Michelle Bachmann, the U.S. Congresswoman, on because Ted Anderson knows one of her campaign people and was just going to call. He said, hey, you want Bachmann on? I know, we know her. And I said, yeah. And he goes, well, you'll probably get her on next week. Well, then that became Gawker, Minnesota newspapers. Will she go on Jones's show? Attacking me, and then they called her campaign manager. He said, well, I didn't know about that. And then it's like, Alex is a liar. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, we are being micromanaged and tracked, and everything we do being gone over with a white glove. It is really getting insane. By the way, Cynthia McKinney has been kidnapped by Israeli troops. Mike Rivero is the last person I know to interview her. We're going to get him on here in about 20 minutes to give us a quick update on what's happening with that. Going back to Dr. Tim Ball, climatologist. Doc, you were going to get into the overall population reduction agenda itself, that global warming is just the governmental, economic, energy straitjacket to, as you said, put a kink in the hose for the fuel for civilization. They get us under civilization, they get us urbanized, what they said by design, to control us and domesticate us. Then they start incrementally, like we're a HAL 9000, turning off the civilization. They're really just a bunch of control freaks. Break it down for us.
Yeah, just a quick comment on your question to your staff there. I think that what I get from you is that we can disagree, but we don't have to be disagreeable. But anyway,
absolutely.
Beyond that, the whole idea about overpopulation, of course, starts with Malthus back in the 18th century and arguments that, the population's outgrowing the food supply and so on. One of the things that makes the U.S. so successful and so powerful is that it has been more successful in producing food to feed its people than any other nation on the planet. In fact, not only growing enough for itself, but exporting to the world. And from that surplus food, of course, comes surplus time, and you set up the civilization. What happens over time is that the population shift. And right now you've got in the U.S. 2% of the population that are officially listed as farmers, about 18%, 20% rural population. But people move into the cities and they become disconnected from the food supply. And once of course you're dependent upon what's in the supermarket, you are effectively lost control. Once you can't feed yourself. And of course, we're seeing the same thing going on in China. I mean, the massive thing that's occurred in China is the shift of the population from the rural areas. They've gone from about 80% to rural down to less than 50% in about 10 years. And the demand for homes and so on is driving a lot of that economy. And so the population idea really got to a peak back in the 70s. Now, one of the things that drove it, and this is when I started my climate career, was that global cooling was the consensus then, and that's why I'm not a consensus person, because in the CIA were doing reports on, the world's overpopulated, and we're not going to be able to feed ourselves with this global cooling, and out of that, of course, the Club of Rome, and there was a meeting in Rome in 1976 about the world's going to starve to death by the year 2000, and the simplistic computer models, which are at the basis of all of these problems, were just saying, here's the trend, and it's going to continue, and the world simply can't survive past. And all of those predictions are wrong, but somehow they've still got the floor. And people like Paul Ehrlich, who was the one that was pushing the overpopulation idea, was at the heart of that. And then, of course, Gore organizing that conference in Cairo, Egypt. What better place than to say, "Oh, look, there's poverty due to overpopulation right outside the window." And that idea of the world's overpopulated. Of course, the question you got to ask is, which populations have we got too many of? Which ones are we going to, eliminate? How are we going to thin the herd? I mean, just frightening implications to all of this focus upon world overpopulation.
That's right. It's seen as common knowledge by any of the intelligentsia to go, the people bomb. We've got to cull the population. Well, then ask, who are we going to cull? Who are we going to kill? And then you look at the point you just made, that we're actually concentrated populations, and that once a nation becomes industrialized, they actually begin to have negative population growth, like Europe with 1.3, Japan with 1.3, Italy with even lower, 1.2. Europe is dying. Russia is dying. The United States is dying if it wasn't for the massive immigrant replacement influx. And so, and the UN admits that if they just industrialize the third world, that it would actually lift them up and they wouldn't have so many children. But you read the World Population Report put out by the UN, you read the Royal Commission on Population put out by the British government, they say that population and industrialization is the threat. And so they say, we're not going to give them industrialization. We're going to let their population swell to keep them down, and then we're going to use birth control and sterilization and war and famine to then cull that mass. So use the people bomb as a weapon to keep the third world down, then kind of exterminate them with war, famine, and sterilization. So the eugenicists aren't even doing what they're saying. It's not some high and mighty eugenicist view that's bad enough, but with some rationale. This is just a cover story for kind of low-level thugs to carry out the eugenics. The top guys are just playing a global game of Risk to knock out all their enemies.
Exactly, and what you're talking about there is the demographic transition. Anybody can Google that phrase, demographic transition, and it's the well-documented showing that as you become industrialized, first of all, the death rate goes down, and but then it's followed by the birth rate goes down, and then the population starts to decline. And of course, a lot of countries are offsetting this by paying people to have a third child. I know Quebec up in Canada here, Italy's done it, but also a lot of countries it's being masked by immigration. And if you look at that in the U.S. and the discussion about immigration, so it's masking the actual demographic transition that's going on. And
that's why Germany and France are full of North Africans and Arabs.
Oh, yeah. Because
some German cities have half the population they did just 40 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, there's no question. And as I said, at that conference in Rome in 1976, one of the arguments by a lot of the countries was, look, let us industrialize, and that will cause the population to decline. And of course that was rejected completely. But the whole idea about if you want to limit. By the way, just very interesting thing, Alex, is that you can calculate this out yourself. But if the average family of about 2.7, 2.8 people, you could put them in 1,000 square foot homes on 3,000 square foot lots with roads and parks and the normal facilities, and the population under those conditions, which would be ideal in most of the world, all of the world's population could fit in the southern half of Alberta. Now, would Albertans like that? Probably not. But it gives you an idea. When you look at Canada, for example, here we are, the second largest country in the world, and we've got a population equal to California. And so when you start talking about overpopulation, it's absolute nonsense. And, of course, the other thing that came out of that conference in Cairo, they were pointing the finger at Asia and Africa, saying, they're overpopulated. The country with the highest population density in the world is the Netherlands, but they got one of the highest standards of living. So when you start to look at the statistics and what was going on with all of this, the overpopulation thing, and it's a thing that people fear. I don't want more people in my neighborhood.
Exactly. It's that it's not industrialized is why Calcutta is a cesspit. It is because it's not industrialized that Mexico City is a hell pit. We've got to industrialize them with the new clean industries But the globalists, when you really read their papers, they're suppressing all that. That's why it's so sickening. They claim, oh, we want to make you adopt new clean systems. They're actually vertically